Right, so we are now recording. So Matt, back over to you when you're ready.
All right, sounds excellent. And just for everybody's thing, it should be up there now. Yep. Okay, so again, this is a very broad overview of our domain reputation data. So we came out with this through our intelligence API, more or less to say that there's been so many folks out there that more or less you look at our data, and what we were publishing before was either it's listed or it's not listed. So you either query it would be in our results, or it wouldn't be in our results. And the unfortunate thing about that is there are sometimes where a domain is going to be bad for a long amount of time, but it's going to fall off of our radar for what we're not seeing. So things can still have a negative reputation, but not be listed within one of our DNSBLs or even our DNS firewall feeds. And what we determined there is let's start giving these things a reputational score. We've always been doing that, but it wasn't something that we were really exposing out. And in the beginning, when we first started doing this, we were doing it the opposite way, and we were scoring things. The higher your score was, the worse you were, and the more negative your score was, the better you were. We were kind of doing it like golf, and we found that to be confusing, so we flipped it over. And now the higher you score is, the better you are, the more negative, the worse you are. So looking at all of this, we wanted to be able to provide people with not just saying that you query example.com and you get a negative 4.3. That's not really telling you too much. It's just saying certain things about a domain that you can take it however you want to do it, but it's not really giving you anything actionable. So we wanted to break these things out into specific pieces. So we have things like tags on these domains, and the tags can be things like phishing, abused, malware, certain things that we have assigned to it. Doesn't mean that every single domain that we have is going to have a tag, but the tags out there are the attribution, what we think is the challenge with the domain. And then we have something around abused or not. And what we mean by the abused thing is it's somebody who is legitimate but has been compromised. And then with that's so because certain people don't want to block shared resources, which can and are being abused. Because I don't know if anybody would want to block Google Drive. Sometimes I do, because of just the amount of abuse that happens with them. But being able to give that additional information, let somebody know that, hey, this is an abused shared type of infrastructure, so people will be able to understand and make better decisions about it when they're going to be allowing it to access their network or access specific sources. And our next thing on here that we're talking about is clusters. Now, you more want to talk about this as APTs, but we decided to come up with the name clusters. I don't know why. That was a development decision. But it's essentially when we have found specific actors, we tie them together and we put them under this specific cluster. So you can query our data against it, be able to find anybody who is related, any domains that are related. So you'll be able to access that additional information. And I've already talked about the score. So again, tags. This is talking about various things. And here's an example of all of the tags that we have. And I know that this doesn't give you the full, understanding of what everything is, but it at least gets you pointed in the right direction of what type of abuse we think that it is. And I do say think, because not every time we're not always going to be 1000% correct. And also, we may not attribute every single tag that may be associated with the domain, because we may be only seeing spam. In some cases, we may be only seeing malware, but that domain could be involved in all sorts of things. So these are the things that we've seen and we've observed. And again, talking about those clusters, those APTs that are being able to let you sort people into their specific groups, a specific actor. Some people that may be familiar with Spamhaus, we have the registry of known spammers, which you probably may have seen has been getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Well, calling people out, having names and whatnot with an individual group is not something you want to do. So especially in our privacy and GDPR age. So we've assigned these things into these specific clusters with a specific hash, so you're able to identify them. And we've been building out those and provide that within this API. So this is kind of what a cluster looks like. So if you query it against that cluster, you'd be able to see all of the domains associated with it. So, and we also have that we let people understand how long a domain is going to be listed within our system, because it's just been a complaint and people wanted to be able to have it. And this is something that we added in. And then the next piece was just when we start giving a little bit more context is what we're calling reputational dimensions. But it's essentially, what kind of category they are being scored in. So if you look at human, that means that an individual has looked at something and has seen that there was evidence of spam. You see here that the human number is a 25. That can also be something like specific scorings that happen with systems like the Tranco system that ranks domains up. And we provide that additional context and let somebody understand that it's because a human made a decision on this. And if we go down this list, we're talking about identity, which is things like their authentication and whatnot. Has it all been set up for the domain? Infrastructure, where it's hosted, or what type of domain resolvers is it using? And malware is pretty self-explanatory. And then SMTP is if they're sending or not. So we also provide the sending IP addresses, what we've seen, where we've seen it sending from, and the reputation associated with those IPs. So if you're checking against one of these domains in here, you'll be able to see that it's got this negative reputation for a certain set of IPs. So you could just say, I'm going to block these IPs and I'm going to let the rest of the other stuff through, and it should be legitimate mail going through with that domain. This is also something that goes back and keys into that SMTP dimension category and gives it a negative positive score. And name servers, that type of reputation, it's the same type of thing when you're thinking about the IPs. Are we seeing specific type of actors from it? What are the other domains that are on there? What do they look like? What's the reputation of those domains? And then if there's host names that are listed, and we will give you the when those are listed and when those are listed until, because there's sometimes where we're not going to have the root domain listed or the primary domain listed. We're going to have those subdomains listed, and that's to be able to protect against those shared resources that may have compromises or somebody who's using their system maliciously to be able to affect sending out some of their malware or phishing or whatnot. And last, we provide these malware hashes, and these hashes are URLs and the hash that we have of the malware. So that's a quick overview, guys, of the domain system. Some stuff that I additionally wanted to talk about was that we provide additional context within those dimensions that we provide. So if it's SMTP, you can also look for additional context, and that wasn't in this presentation, but it's definitely something that's important for you guys to understand that's in there. We'll let you know if we're seeing it if we're seeing a domain in headers, if we're seeing it in DKIM signatures, if it's hitting spam traps or not, if it's helloing from certain IPs. we'll provide that additional stuff. And if we're seeing it in passive DNS, there's a good 20, 30 odd contexts that we have that are associated with that. I can list them on the screen. They're unfortunately in a notepad, but I can do that for you. And I will pull them up right now, and we can just take a quick look at them. Apologies that it isn't a pretty presentation, but this just gives you a little bit of more understanding of how we're seeing it. So these are some of the dimensions. I know it may be small. I will try and increase the size for you so you can see it, but these are additional contexts that we're adding. So the OSINT, did we find it somewhere online associated in a forum that was sending that had malware within it? So we do have these additional things in here. And one thing to understand also is where we are currently with our intelligence API is something of a continual evolution and process. We do want to expose more data. There are certain things that we're definitely not going to be able to put in there. We're not going to be able to put full email headers, and we're not going to be able to put full messages. We're definitely not going to be doing things like who are they sending to, but being able to provide folks with as much possible data as we can give them without exposing like the back end stuff. But we want to let people understand these are the contexts that we provide. This is the information that we can provide. And yes, as Andrew was saying, if you can go out and rebuild our domain reputational data sets based off of this information, that's great. But we want to be able to provide you as much information as possible so you can make the best informed decisions about what happens to things that are trying to access your network. So with that, I wanted to stop for a second, see if anybody had any questions or wanted to ask about anything. So I'm just sitting here talking at you for the entire time.
Thanks, Matt. So does anyone have any questions so far? And if you do, either pop it in the chat if that's easier, or unmute and ask if that's more convenient.
Not sure if I missed it in the presentation, but I see the score and I see the Boolean flag abused. Did you cover how do you go from not abused to abused? Is it purely based on score?
So what we determine as abused is essentially it's something's not going to show up as abused if we know that it's that it was created with malicious intent. The abused flag is used for things that are compromised. So it's a legitimate source or something that we've identified as legitimate. And that's when we're going to put the abused flag in there. If it's, some MicrosoftPhishing.com, it's not going to be marked as abused. It's going to just have specific tags associated with it.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, Josh. Anyone else got any questions for Matt?
I just have some feedback, and that is, I love that you're adding context to data. Most people just say, yeah, just tell me what to block, right? But that only works for protection services, but there are so many investigators out there that are interested in certain things. And so I love what you're doing here, and congratulate you.
Yeah, I definitely want, we want people to make better informed decisions about, because Spamhaus can say all that we want to about everything, but somebody could block something that they shouldn't be blocking, or it falls off the age of our times with our domains, because we only list domains for 14 days. And that's from the last time that we saw it. So if a malicious party goes off and just stops doing stuff for 15 days, it's going to drop off our data set, and it's still going to have the negative reputation. The actual reputational score doesn't change. It's just, is it listed or not type of thing. And we want people to stop thinking about in terms of listed, not listed, and just think about the actual reputation of it. It's like when you look at, if you queried our stuff for Google, they have a really negative reputation for SMTP. Unfortunately, it's Google. We can't really list that domain. But it will help people make some decisions on if that's accessing their network. So yeah, Michael, you had a question?
Yeah, just real quick, Matthew. When Andrew and I were at the ICANN and OARC event in Vietnam last week, and one of the things that we've heard is that some TLDs, even CCTLDs, are beginning to actually do registrant verification. .bank does that, Vietnam, .be, a growing number. I guess my question is, would there be any way, or do you envision Spamhaus providing any type of meta-analysis of the TLD regarding verified registrant or unverified registrant to help in determining abuse as to, hey, if this is a verified TLD, maybe we're looking more at a compromised domain name as opposed to a maliciously registered domain name? Given this context that you provided, that seemed to be the next logical question of granular detail to a third party in doing an analysis. Just wondering if you've thought of that.
Not really, but I like everybody, I've got an opinion. It would be if that data was exposed in some way by the registries, so we can understand, this has been verified. Because as far as I know, that information is not something that is publicized. And honestly, all it really needs to be a hash or a flag, a 1 or 0 that is set at that top level. But that would be interesting to have. And also, yes, it would help us a lot in determining specifics like, yes, this is a compromised domain because this is something that has been verified and whatnot. The part where it gets a little sticky is, we would need to understand the actual verification process and how, because I mean, if it's FTLD, I completely would trust it. But if VeriSign were doing it with .com, I'm not sure how, because I just don't know how they would be implementing it. It'd be interesting to talk. I'll be there in Hamburg, and I would love to talk with more people about verification, because I think that is a great route for the TLDs to go, and it will provide more security in understanding. And I don't expect everybody to get themselves verified. So with that roundabout answer, yes, I would love to see verification, then be able to provide feedback as long as it's something that we could consume down from them.
Yep, sure. So look forward to having a beer in Hamburg discussing that topic. And yes, I think what's interesting is a number of CCTLDs are using third-party KYC vendors. And in the case in Vietnam, they specifically are verifying the registrants, natural persons, against their internal national databases as well as businesses. And Thailand is doing something similar. One of the issues, though, that they have, and this is where it potentially gets down to a domain name specific call, is they have not yet addressed that for foreign registrations. They have done it internally. So this, to me, is part of it's a growing trend of where the domain name industry is going, and tracking this at a meta level per TLD, I think, is something that not only could help establish best practices across the global industry, but just provide third-party researchers more granularity in their research. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Michael, and I will be all about having that beer. Just not right now. It's only 11:30 in the morning for me. So, but yeah, no, that's great, and I'll definitely look forward to hearing how more TLDs are working on doing that. A thing also about, you know, when we look at the CCTLDs is I would love for uniformity in their who-is output. That would be amazing, because it's very yes, it's different every one that you look at, and then, you know, there's certain things like why doesn't yes, but Patrick RDAP for the win. You know, just things like .de not having a create date, like why, you know, and just let's talk about some uniformity that maybe they could have, and it'll be a discussion that I'll have with the CCNSO. But you know, we'll see what comes back from that. Of course, they're going to be looking at Spamhaus and be screaming at us because we list domains, but you know, it'll be an interesting conversation with them. There's also like multiple things with those CCTLTs that I'm really interested in figuring out and getting my head around. So, yeah.
Sounds like there could be a rich vein of conversation that could then extend
Black
into
jacket.
the ICANN session, if they do that next year, on threat feeds and resolvers. Yeah, because I think it's a great idea if you could have data from
Let's make it happen.
that'd be very useful.
Mhm. Yeah. And you know, there is one thing that I did want to ask of the group. So, you know, we have, you know, we've come out with multiple portals and whatnot for the community. So we have a CERT portal, we have an ISP portal, and we have something that's called the reputation portal. And I mean, this is something where we wanted to give back to folks and let them be able to like when it comes to one of them, the ISP portal is so people can manage the policy block list ranges that they have with us. And you know, if you look on the side of it, the reputation portal is kind of like its cousin. You can't really manage the PBL stuff, but what we were trying to provide to them was, you know, listings that they were having in their networks. And it kind of just fizzled out on us. And I know that without knowing anything about what this portal is and what it represents, but it was essentially just showing us, showing individuals like, what type of exploits do you have? What type of SMTP issues do you have? Are you listed on our botnet controller lists? Are you listed on our SBL? And, you know, this is something that we're like, here, come sign up. If you have an ASN, come sign up and use this stuff. And we didn't get much buy-in for it. And I'm curious is it maybe because that was based off of essentially is it listed or is it not listed? Do you think if we were providing this additional context and like what we're doing with the domain data, do you think that would have a better impact for people? Because really all we want to do is just, here's this data, it's impacting your network. Here's this stuff to help them get it resolved, because we can't send out notifications for every listing that we create, or we would be just, we're not an ESP. We send enough email as it is with our SBL notifications, but would that additional context, in your opinions, would that additional context provide people with a better want to be able to come and consume that data? Now, this, I know we're talking about this without you knowing anything else about that reputation portal, but just opinions from the group, if any.
I'm never short of opinions.
Okay.
ISPs struggle with there's the balance between how much effort are you going to have toward making sure your networks are clean versus all the other fires that you have to have. One of the things that's awesome about your service is the fact that if you have, it's a way for them to actually say, all right, this is bad. So when they get the abuse report, they could actually go to your service and like actually research, oh, that's why I'm getting these abuse notices from other people and takedowns or whatever. But how much time, it really comes down to an individual actually managing time for that. So it has to be useful for them. And some will, some will, if they're actually saying, I want to clean up my network, I actually want to do a better, present better, will work out. But there's actually one of the things that you pointed out is adding the domains. You have through passive, what's hosted on their networks. All they know is their networks. They don't necessarily know everything that's being hosted on there. So when you have like a Carter site or even just like a miner, right, being hosted on their network, they'd want to know about that. So if you can add the domain information, and if there's bad reputation associated with the domain and it's hosted on their network, that could actually be useful to their abuse department. So that when they get the takedown notices, it's going to save them a lot of time and guesswork and knowing how to work with the customer, whether to ignore them because they're probably liars, or whether, yeah, this was, a, compromised situation.
Yeah, understood. And yeah, that's, the discussion is more or less, how much of that context do we want to just give away? Like, unfortunately, we got to make money. But it's figuring out, what point, where is the line? And it does make me think about, how we're presenting the data to them, not just in a here you log into the portal and you can see all that, because that's not for the abuse desk, that's for the manager, because they just want to see the big numbers, or actually they want to see the small numbers. But they want to see the numbers and they want to see the graphs and all the pretty stuff. The abuse desk guys just want to be like, okay, here's the issue and here's how I fix it and here's how I do that. And maybe that's more. And yes, Eric, I think tying together the domain to the IPs and all of that would be something that would work out pretty well. Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else with any thoughts on that?
Or any thoughts in general?
Mm.
Are you mad about a listing?
Or is it too much for a Monday afternoon if you're in Europe, Monday morning if you're in North America?
There was something Andrew brought up at the beginning of the call. It wasn't really discussed during what Matthew was talking about, but that is that you could actually reverse engineer how these lists are created based on the data that's provided. And that had me thinking it's a separate topic, but one that I'm sure Spamhaus cares about as well, which is a lot of information is made available, good or, binary good or bad over DNS block lists, right? Cute little technology. I was once in a room with Paul Macapetris, and he said probably dumbest idea ever, because it actually exposes your information, out in the open. Anyone can query it, which was part of the intent. But you could actually monitor it. So if you got a mail server doing all sorts of lookups against DNS block lists, it is something that that can be gleaned and people can use. And at Farsight, when we did the passive DNS, or at ISC at the passive DNS, we just put all the DNSBLs into a filtering list, because we knew that, gosh, if we had that available in a database, you could actually see the listing history of everything over time. And that's probably, people who make these would probably not really appreciate that. And then along came response policy zones, where it was actually a private and encrypted subscription mechanism to similar type of information. So when people are saying, what are better ways to distribute it, APIs like Spamhaus is having, or RPZs, are definitely a better way to go, because we don't really need that in the open. And the DNS is supposed to be used more for infrastructure and less for a database. We have distributed databases. Let's use them correctly.
Yeah, and it's definitely why, yes, moving to the APIs, and we're offering up RPZs as well, and we publish some BGP as well, and that's stuff that's not just sitting out there like the DNSBLs are. So, yes.
Yeah, and I think from memory, I think the point Simon made, just going back to what I said at the start, was not so much a reverse engineered sort of the Spamhaus feed. And I guess he wouldn't be a fan of that, but if someone felt they had different weightings of factors, so you could build your own instead. So that was when this whole topic came up about what data is exposed, which felt to me like a good thing. But so hence Matt being on this call.
Yeah, and if you do, if you want to try to replicate our DBL using the API, you're going to have to do a lot of queries. So, yeah.
Anything else for Matt from anyone? Or any general comments on the topic for that matter? Not seeing anything else in the chat. Can't see any other hands raised. So I think we'll probably draw a line there for now. Matt, in case anyone has any follow-up thoughts, are you happy to share your email address?
Yes. Bringing up I tried to bring up the chat and I closed the chat.
Perfect.
Yes, and you can also connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter, but I don't do Twitter, X, Twitter, whatever we're calling it today. I don't really do that, but if you want to reach out on LinkedIn as well, you can do that.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much for covering that off. That's really helpful. So I appreciate that. I hope everyone found that useful. I don't have any news headlines for you this week yet, simply because I had to do a disciplinary panel this morning, which overran somewhat. So hence me having to wear a proper shirt for a change. So I'll be pinging those out this evening. So that will bring us fully up to date. Just one reminder though, I think it's today that it is the deadline for the ITF early bird, or whatever they're calling it now. They've rechristened it something different, but the ITF early bird rate anyway, I think finishes today. So if you're planning to go to Prague for ITF 118, then you might want to register today. Otherwise the price bumps up. I can't remember how much exactly. I think it's about $125 for the week, something of that order. So register today, save a little bit of money if that's on your schedule. The other thing on talking of schedules, if anyone is super early, is that what it's called, Mark? Yes, thank you. Well, early bird, old school. Equally a reminder, if anyone is going to Kyoto for the IGF meeting in about 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks time, and wants to meet up, drop me a line separately. It'd be good to see a few people in person. They're much more policy orientated than technology orientated there, but there'll be some crossover of some people, I think. So it would be good to see you if you do find yourself in Japan that week. But other than that, then, as I say, look out for the sort of headlines a bit later on today. They should hit your mailbox. And other than that, thanks everyone for your time. Particularly thanks to Matt for coming on to talk about sort of threat feeds, reputation, etc. And have a fantastic week, everyone. And look forward to catching up same time next week. when I'm hoping that Robert Seffer from the DNS4EU consortium will be on. I'm just waiting for him to confirm his availability. So again, I'll pop an email out when Robert's confirmed that in the week. So thanks all. Speak to you again soon. Bye.